Hi, everyone.
Hi, Erin.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing well as well. I'm excited for our first meeting for the
I
year.
know. Yay. I had some struggles with our new CRM, our new way we send out email. I was the guinea pig. I was the first person to send out a mass email and learned all kinds of new things about how that works.
Yeah,
So apologies.
I had trouble with the
first link.
Yeah, but I got it through through our regular site. So
yeah, cool. I set up a follow-up email, and I thought that how it worked was that anyone who opened the first one would get the second one with the new link. But I learned just like, I don't know, 20 minutes ago that that's not how it worked.
And actually, I'm not on the email list. I was wondering if you could add me to the email list.
Of course.
Catherine Overson gets the emails, and then she forwarded it to me, and I was like, oh goodness, I'm coming today.
Okay.
But I would love to be on that list.
Of course. Yeah, I'll add you.
And I think Victor wants to be on the list too. I don't think he's on the list either.
Okay. I'll make sure both of you are on that list.
Great. Yay. Thank you, Erin.
You're welcome. So we'll get started here in about 5 minutes. I'll let some people, if folks are coming, join late. Let me see here, share my screen. Okay. Stop my share.
Hi, Erin.
Hi, Victor. So nice to see you. Happy New Year.
You too. Happy New Year to you too. I'll go back to not showing my mug.
It's fine. Yeah, you can just lurk. Pipe up if you when we start the discussion, because I'm sure you guys have a lot to contribute to this particular meeting about data and analytics and reporting. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. I don't know if we'll get any other folks on, but just in case people are late, grabbing something to eat. Okay, well, I'm going to get started. Guess we'll have a small group today. People are probably still on break, or I hope they are anyway, and taking some time for themselves. But Happy New Year, everyone who's here. And I'm so glad that you were able to find the link and join. So I wanted to kick off the year. I knew it'd be a late crowd probably today. So I'm going to make this topic stretch over the next two. So excuse me, this one and the next one. And then what I plan is whatever we gather, whatever information we gather in this particular meeting will probably set the stage for subsequent meetings. Like, so right now it's all about data analytics and reporting all kind of crammed together. But I think knowing what you all care about or the types of things that you want, different functionality, I'll probably be breaking these up into separate meetings going forward to do more of a deeper dive and collect more deeper requirements from folks. So welcome to the first topic of the year. And we'll have these once a month for anyone new to this meeting. I schedule this on the first Friday of every month. And at this link, let me show you now. Let me put this in the chat. Most of you probably have this already, but just in case, I will put this in the chat. And you can check there regularly for upcoming meeting topics. Also, you can get the recordings from past meetings there. You can also get links to our GitHub repository where we're, where we have all the open source content and code for Torus. And you can also submit ideas and requirements that might be important to you, and I'm sure to others as well. So check that web page out and explore, and definitely reach out to me directly. Even if you don't have to go through the form on there, you can always just shoot me an email directly if you have some ideas that you want to share. So when we talk about data and analytics and reporting, what we're really thinking about are the data that any one of us uses day to day to either, as you're teaching a class, an OLI class, as you're looking at whether you're authoring and want to see statistics on how to iteratively improve your course, but also research. And I know there's a lot of researchers that use our data anonymously and probably has some requirements about how to see that or what to see a little bit easier. Then this is also kicking off kind of a long going conversation that we'll be having with the community about how to, what kinds of dashboards, analytics, and visualizations that might be needed, again, for as you're teaching, as you're developing, as you're improving content or researching. And so, but I also want to think about things that we didn't bake into the original OLI, which is reporting for maybe others who aren't in our system. So if you have reporting needs, you need to share reports out to others who are external to our site and to our application, then trying to think ahead of what kinds of reports would be needed in that respect to be able to share out with other folks. So some discussion points, some things to guide the discussion, just to get you guys thinking. So what data would you like to see for, again, authoring, teaching, aggregate analysis for iterative improvement or research? What data do you use now? And then think about how you would like to see it better, or how you would like to, or what else you might need in addition to what you can use now. So again, what do you wish you had? What do you think would make it easier for you to see the results of things more clearly and easily? And again, just how do you feel about the current data and analytics offered for each of these areas? So as you know, or maybe don't know, we have for delivery purposes, we have what's called a learning dashboard, which tracks student progress in the formatives in the aggregate. So you can drill in to individual students, but our learning dashboard right now shows things in the aggregate, and then you can like drill in from there. Echo has, if you've used our authoring environment, Echo, then you might know, or you may not know, that as a course that's been developed in Echo is used in the OLI delivery platform, we can actually pull aggregated data back into a view in Echo so that you can see how students are doing in the aggregate against learning objectives, skills, and individual questions. And then, of course, we have the ability to populate, not easily right now, which is easier with Torus, but populate a grade book in your LMS through the summative activities and questions that are delivered through OLI. Now with Torus, that's really automated. Now in the delivery system, you have to kind of export that gradebook data and import it into your LMS. But right now it's push button updating through Torus. So those are just kind of the examples that we have already. So let's dig in. Who would like to go first and talk about data that they would like to see or get access to? Maybe start with, what do you use now? Because I don't want to lose, if there's certain things that you use now very regularly, I want to make sure we keep those, right? And we want to keep and expand on those. We don't want to override in any way as we're starting to develop new dashboards and new views of the data. Anyone want to speak up first? And if not, I can also just start to demo some of the things I just talked through, like some of the data that we already have on offer. Anybody have a preference?
Aaron, hi.
Yeah.
Vic.
Hi, Victor.
So now, when we finish with a course, what we do is we make a request. Recently, we've been doing this through HOW, right? We make a request to get analytics data in the form of those compressed CVS files that has basically everything that we want, including individual responses, repeat responses. In our setup, as you know, we have a survey, a pre and post survey on what students believe about study skills. That for others, that's what our course is about, teaching study skills. So we go through this process of making a request, and someone on your end, I think almost always, if not always, it's Raphael, does that. I always copy you on these, and we've gotten into a routine. So my question is, in the new system, is there a way going to be there that we could directly get those data rather than having to make a request every time? And as you know, in our case, because we're doing so much developmental work, we're always asking you for a new set of analytic data for a given offering. And now that we've got versions of this course for physics and chemistry and biology and the default and statistics, you know, that's a lot of demand. So that's my question.
Well, since you brought it up, it's a really good way for me to, or for us to, like a good starting point. Like you do make those requests pretty regularly, you know, after every semester. And those requests, because you have these different flavors of the courses, are probably going to expand. So one thing I can do is make sure that we start with your request and build that in to the system as one way, one review or reporting view or whatever. But you also gave me another idea of something that we don't have at the moment, which is data across different courses. So this is exactly the kind of thing I'm thinking of. Like, I'm imagining we don't have a lot of super admin type reporting and analytics. So me as even an admin in the system can't go in and say, okay, I want to compare or see the analytics for this course, and this course kind of all in one place. That's something that would probably be really valuable to you, to be able to just have like almost a, I don't know what to call it, a dashboard, a place where you can kind of click into all the courses that you own and see them across different.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I mean, right now, I mean, here's a specific example of where what you're talking about would be really useful. We deal with it in a different way now, and that is that when we first started the first version of this course on teaching cognitively supported study skills, so-called deep study skills, what we did was our instructional material was focused, if not entirely, almost entirely, on promoting those deep study skills. What we wanted to see was that as going from the beginning to the end of the course, students would report either using or want to use more of those deep study skills, but also that they would be less likely to report that they want to use shallow ones.
Mm-hmm.
But our instructional tool didn't really do much to argue and persuade and instruct about why those shallow skills aren't very good. So in the early versions, what we would see is from pre to post, big increases in the use of the deep study skills, but we didn't see any decrease in the shallow. So, but we saw it. So what we did is in our next instructional iteration, we actually began to build in instruction about the shallow skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's how it relates to you is what we do is we have one data set where we look at what it looked like initially. And then as we've improved it across semesters, we go into the separate data sets and look at the pre and post. But what you're suggesting is maybe if it's all in one place, analytically, we could compare those different versions as we've gotten better at instructing all in one place, rather than the way we do it is we do one data set, we get reports, we get another data set, and then we combine them on our own later.
I just want to capture that too, because that is what I was suggesting, but you added another component to that, which is also being able to compare subsequent versions. So to, you know, previous ones, so you can actually see, is that improvement that you've done to the course actually making an impact? And so I want to make sure I capture that even separately to make sure that that's part of that.
Okay, thank you.
anyone else have anything to add or to expand on, or did that spark any other ideas about things that you'd like to see? Well, maybe I can go and show some of these things to maybe that will spark some ideas and discussion as well. So forgive me, my computer is acting really slow today. Let me go into
Aaron, let
Echo.
me just say one more point,
Please.
which is appreciation and praise. That is the analytic data that we've gotten, from you for our course has been not only wonderful, we couldn't have identified what kinds of iterative improvements we needed to make if we didn't always, after every offering of that course, go in and get those analytics, because our team, we have robust meetings over a period of time after each offering where we dig into those data. So what you're providing, at least in terms of our request for those data, those analytics, has been not only useful, we couldn't have made the improvements we've made without them. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm glad to know that's helpful. And I'm glad to hear that that data set that we give you has what you need, because then that can serve as a really good starting point for what we build into Torus. So that's excellent. So I'm going to log into Echo here, and this is our authoring, our current, actually already legacy authoring platform. And hopefully my computer doesn't make this completely difficult. Because it's really slow. I probably should have restarted before this meeting. While I'm waiting for this, I mentioned earlier, maybe some of you weren't on yet, that I sent out the announcement for this I was the first person to use our new CRM, our new customer relationship management system and emailing system. So I was on like a help desk call right before this where they were kind of remote desktoping, and I think that's what bogged down my computer. Let's see here. History is what I usually show. Okay. So chemistry, because I know, I'm pretty sure this one has data generated in it in the place we want to see. If not, I have another course I can show instead. Let me see here. Yep, this one hasn't. Well, this is an exercise in patience. Okay. Just give me a second, guys. I appreciate your patience as well. Okay, here we go. So this one I always is probably the first one I should have chosen to show off the data, because I know for sure it has data in it. So in our authoring environment, our current authoring environment, we have the ability to, like I said, pull in data from previous uses of the course, student runs. And then we have this analytics tab where you can open up, these are the learning objectives that are in this particular unit. And then you can expand these to see the skills, the questions that are associated with those skills, and some usage statistics here. And what these represent right now are the number of attempts, how many of those attempts, what percentage of students got it right the first time they attempted it, how many eventually get it correct. And then this number here is a relative difficulty. We take into account hints, if hints were needed as well. And then, I mean, this course actually it's delivered twice a year to basically all incoming freshmen at Carnegie Mellon. And so the person who owns this course has iterated on it a lot over the years. And so you can see a lot of these numbers are good, but there's always places for improvement, as you can imagine. And I already know some places where the analytics maybe don't look so good or aren't available. Oh, there we go. And what happens is these are color coded to show red and yellow if those numbers aren't what we think they should be. And again, I apologize for my slowness on my computer, but here we go. Here's some places where we know that this particular question, students obviously get it wrong most of the time, right from the get-go, and then they eventually get it right. So this is a place where possibly the person who owns this course have gone in and looked at that data a little further to see, okay, what's going on with the question? Is there enough supporting material around it to help students answer the question? But sometimes you really want to use the question as a learning mechanism. And so the fact that they get it wrong the first time, but eventually most get it right, eventually shows initially to me that, okay, it might be a really overly difficult question. It might be a trick question. It might be something where they want the students to learn from the hints and feedback that are incorporated into the question. So all these analytics do are present the data, but it's up to the individual developers or instructors to go in and say, okay, is this what we expect? Is this what we want to happen? That sort of thing, and make improvements based on that. Given that I know this course has been iterated on a lot, I'm imagining that these questions that have the 4% have enough probably hints and feedback built into them that guide students toward the correct answer. And so it's okay that they don't get it right the first time. But if you saw, I can imagine when you first build a course, it would not look this green. I can guarantee you that. But so this is some of the analytics we have that we can deliver right in context where people are iterating and authoring their courses. In Torus, we did build this out similarly, but we can also always improve it, as you can imagine. So let me get to Torus. And again, I'm just kind of walking you through these things you might already be familiar with, just to spark ideas for, oh, well, that's nice, but we'd really like this on top of that. So I'm just kind of working through to see if it sparks any other ideas. So let me get in to show you right now what we have already built into Torus. And again, it's very similar, but we could always look for ways to improve. So in Torus, it's under this improve insights section. And again, very similar. Here's each question. Here are the very similar statistics. And then, but now we can toggle and see these by page, by objective. So we already have a little more functionality built in to be able to get different views. I can imagine that color coding helps, that we could add that in if you think it helps. This is pretty much all we have right now. It's very, very similar, like I said, but you can do some different views and toggles, and we'll just keep making sure that this gets built up more. I think we've already kind of encountered through some of our piloting courses that being able to see this and know when, like, so say I go in and I change this question now because I find that the analytics aren't very good on it. I want to iterate on it. We have to figure out then what happens to the data. Does the data replace this data, or does it list it as a different version of the same question so that you can compare, or maybe comparing, being able to see this version of the course next to this version of the course. Not quite sure what's the best approach to that. Would you want to see it all in kind of one big list, but know which questions might have been changed, or would working on it like full version versus full version of the course, or maybe both, right?
Yeah, this, Victor, again, this is a good example. So in our checkpoint quizzes, we've used the summary statistics, the aggregate statistics that, the success rate for a question is 30% or something like that, which then prompts us to go in and look at the question, just like you're describing, Erin. And, almost always anyway, we something pops out at us, and what we'll do is we'll make a change either to the stem or to the troublesome distractor or whatever, to see. I mean, as you say, sometimes questions are just hard, and a low success rate doesn't mean it's a bad question necessarily. So, but we go in and make those changes. And again, so what we then do is we have those data summarized for a given semester or offering of the course. We go in and make the change. What we then do is we physically go in, look at the summary analytics for the checkpoint quizzes and go, oh, item 13 went from 33% correct hit rate to 65% or something like that. We think we addressed that, and then we might look at the next semester. So being able to do that in one place as those offerings occur across offerings would be a good feature. I mean, it isn't that it can't be done the way it is, it can. The other, just go back to the analytics data that we request, in terms of these CVS files, is sometimes we're looking at the aggregate data like you're showing here. That's all we need to do. But for other statistical analyses, mostly related to our research questions, we want to see how an individual student changes, say, across the course. So one of our constructs is academic self-efficacy, and we assess that in each of the 6 or 7 modules that we have in the course. So while it might be nice to know that overall academic self-efficacy increased in terms of the summary statistics, we have research questions that for certain students, we might expect one pattern of change, and for others, a different one. And that's where you have to have it broken down by the unit of analysis being the student. That's just another argument about why the analytic data in the terms of the files that we request at the individual level allow questions to be answered that can't be answered by the aggregate data because everything's smushed together.
Right. But I'm glad you brought that up, Victor, because we've had that request as well, to be able to at least follow. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to know the student name, just to be able to follow that data point through the whole course. And that's why I put individual student changes across the course, and of course anonymized is fine. But with maybe, but knowing that that one ID, this is how they went through the course, and be able to see that that learning is taking place for any individual student. Yeah, we don't have those analytics right now baked into our views, but it's been requested. So for example, we have a number of students in Ken Kadinger's e-learning design course who use our system as part of their projects. And their project, one of the projects I know of, is to create some content, put it in front of folks as students, and then look at the data and iterate on it. And they have been the most active in terms of using Torus at the moment and giving us feedback on the kind of data and what the analyses they're doing on that real short timeline, and what kinds of things they would like to have. And that's definitely one of them. So I'm glad you've mentioned it, because I don't want to miss that.
Thanks.
Yeah, Erin, obviously I'm from the same group as
Yeah.
Lauren. But I was thinking about how important it is to be able to know like what the identifier is, because knowing, especially if we had the capability to like kind of choose how the identifier was formatted, that might even be useful. Like, because obviously students at our institution, they have unique student IDs. And so it'd be nice to be able to basically match up whatever your identifier is with the identifier at our institution.
Oh, well, you just brought up a whole other issue that I know comes up regularly, and thanks for chiming in on that as well, because so right now a lot of question IDs as well as so I'll demonstrate with the Torus data. So if you don't change the names of questions and actually name them here, that's an objective. I had to go by activity. So we have an automatic naming that happens when you generate a new question in Torus, and it's based on the type of question it is. But as you can see, if you aren't careful in your design to have a naming convention that you use, when you get the data, you're not even going to be able to tell what question is mapped to what. And so being able to have more control over not only student identifiers, but also question identifiers, even question response identifiers, would probably be really helpful when you're looking at the data, either in the aggregate or drilling in. So your comment sparked another set of requirements that I don't want to lose out on. And so I will add that. Be able to choose identifiers just in general, but I'm going to say here for students, student IDs, questions, etc. It'll catch up.
So, Victor, what Lauren's point, for what we're doing now, where we're collecting data internally at the University of New Hampshire for these improvements and research questions and so on, for that, our IRB permits the linking of student background data with the data we get from CMU, and that's where we have some kind of ID that connects UNH data to individual student data, and then we de-anonymize everything, so on. That's specifically through our IRB. The CMU IRB, that when students log on the open platform or the course instructor platform, that doesn't, those data are by definition de-anonymized or anonymized, right?
Right.
And so, so what Lauren's talking about is for our internal use on our own data, where we have the ability. In other words, once our courses are out on the CMU platform in general, we won't be able to link that up to a student at Arizona State or Michigan Tech or, you know, this community college in California. But it's for our developmental piece. So, you know, whether that's a big issue about student data for the open OLI platform is maybe a different question than if a given member of the community is collecting data internally and they have that kind of IRB approval, then having that feature is, well, it's critical for us anyway.
Right, right. And I'm glad you brought that up as well. So it's, I mean, that's what you've done is expanded on why that identifier, that student identifier, is so very important in your case. But in general, the ability to be able to make it easier to combine the data that we collect with external data in different ways. And I'll probably want to come back around and go more in depth on that particular subject at a later time, and maybe even with you guys specifically, since you have a more immediate need, is a really interesting thing to dig into. I'm not sure how or so you guys haven't even figured out how you're going to do that yet. Is that correct?
How we're going to deal with linking up the data? No, we do that.
Okay. But you found a way to do it, but it's not easy, I'm sure.
No, no, I mean, I think it actually is, because we have these unique IDs from the CMU data, which we match up to a UNH. So I'm just, it isn't that it's difficult or it needs to be improved in Torus. It's just that having that feature for members of the community that do have the ability to link course level data with background data is, I would imagine, for most users would be important. It sure is for us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so that's a request to be able to retain that ability.
Yes, okay, great.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but I have to say, we don't have like an easy interface for it now either, though. You guys probably do a lot of munging of that data with, you know, like the CSV files and things like that. To have an interface that might help us do that more efficiently and effectively would be great.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then just to keep our you know, juices flowing here and our ideas, I'm going to also show really quickly a learning dashboard from our OLI delivery platform. Hopefully I can find one. I didn't have this set up, obviously, but I should be able to find a course to showcase the kind of learning dashboard data that instructors get in real time, to kind of maybe spark some other ideas off of that. Feel free to speak up if you have any other ideas as I'm pulling this up. I have dashboard. Oh yeah, I do. Okay. So for those of you who might not be familiar, and of course I thought there was data in this, that's why I opened it. maybe I need to get into a more meaty subject. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I'm able to toggle module to module. And what it's showing me for each module is, or what it should be showing me, if I, are the learning objectives listed for that module. And again, I'm going to go back out because obviously this one doesn't have data in it the way I expected. Definitely one of these two. So just give me a minute here to find. Pretty sure there is a, it could be signed in with the wrong. I know there's one for chemistry that has data in it. There it is. So for this is properties of matter module in a chemistry course, and it's showing this red, yellow, green. And what that represents are the number of students who are progressing and getting to correctness with the formative activity. So this is just a view of formatives, and this is a live view. So the idea is that as instructors are teaching a class and they assign, this is just one use case, assign properties of matter as homework, work through the formatives in that module. The idea is that, again, just one use case, the instructor could look at this data maybe before going into a lecture on properties of matter to see exactly where students are struggling, or what they are just getting. And again, so they can kind of tailor that, this flip classroom model. They can tailor that lesson, that lecture in class, to what they're seeing in the data here and how students are doing. So for those of you who might be new to this, green is those students who are, are working through the formatives, they're getting to correctness, and they're doing well, they're progressing through that module. I'm going to skip yellow for a second. Red is for those folks who are maybe working through the content and the practice opportunities, but not getting to correctness or skipping around, because the algorithm that runs this learning dashboard actually takes into account patterns as well. And so these folks they could be actually working through all the formatives, but not getting to correctness and running out of practice. Essentially, they need some new challenges or some new practice opportunities. The ones in gray are students who just aren't working through the material enough to even know how they're doing. And then the yellow, of course, is somewhere kind of in between, doing well, getting to correctness, working through. So it's taking into account the number of formatives that they've worked through, if they're getting to correctness, how many hints they're needed, if the pattern is showing that they're making less errors as they go through and work on the same skills, that sort of thing. And so then these are the skills that this learning objective is actually broken down into. And we use this, and instructors can use this as a kind of a diagnostic tool to see, okay, if students are struggling with this learning objective, well, what part of that learning objective are they struggling with? And so that you're not just speaking to the whole objective but describing the 4 states of matter. Maybe there's one of those states that are just tripping folks up more than the others, if that's how it's broken down. And so this gives a really neat view into how students are working through the practice opportunities in real time. And you can even drill in. So I could drill in and see which students are in that category. I can contact them from there. I can also drill into the skills and see the activities associated with those skills and how many students are doing those and how well. I can even start to see what are students answering, what's the type of responses that students are making against the questions in under this skill. So a lot of neat data that you can get real time in our learning dashboard. I don't know if anyone on the call teaches with OLI to be able to kind of comment on this, or even teaches with OLI and uses the dashboard, because I'm finding more instructors I talk to don't even realize the powerful amount of data that we have just in that real-time view. In fact, we just ran a whole workshop with folks who've been using OLI courses for at least a year and had no idea this was available to them. And we're very excited about it once we introduced it to them. So did going through that spark any ideas or about wants, needs in regard to, teaching real time with OLI, and what kinds of information you'd want at your fingertips to help diagnose and help students in real time?
Victor here. I'm getting tired of hearing my own voice.
No, but you guys are so great for
So
talking up.
I use the statistical reasoning course maybe 10 times or even a dozen times. I'm not teaching it anymore over a number of years. And I use those analytics that you were just showing there, that dashboard all the time.
Oh, good.
Informative way, just exactly like you're talking about, is that because I always had an assignment that was due before a class session, which focused on problem solving related to the module that they were working on, or the piece of the module. And so I could go in and see, those gray dots, for example, the people that didn't do anything. That's a whole other set of issues about what's going on there, but to see where people were struggling. And that was very useful. So I sure hope to heck, as an instructor, that would stay, because it was an extremely useful tool.
Great, that's good to know. Because again, we don't want to change anything from what we actually have already if it's useful to you. And maybe what we'll do probably in subsequent meetings is, or even have like separate meetings with folks who we know use the dashboard regularly, to see if there's any kind of improvements to the visualizations or additional data we'd want to see in those. But I'm glad to know, Victor, that you found it very useful in real time.
Now, Erin, I know the analytics are all about collecting data on the students. Do you have any analytics on whether the instructors use the tools?
I don't. That's a good question that I would want to know the answer to, and that we'll probably find out. I can imagine that we're going to be sending out some surveys this year to existing instructor groups to be able to find out, what are they using. And like I said, when we held that session not too long ago, and people were like surprised that this data was available to them, I'm even thinking we have to have a little more, put some more webinars out there regularly to just remind people that this exists, because when people use it, they're really excited about it. But that's a good point. So instructor use stats would be nice to know, even just as admins, but I can imagine we can do more with that data by just to reach out to those individuals and find out, okay, why you do or don't use it, and make sure that we collect that kind of information. But we don't. It's a hard thing to know without probably really digging into some back end data that I wouldn't even know how to get to. But to that point, which isn't as exciting to you all as it is to me, which is to start to think about what kinds of admin level statistics and reporting we'd want to have in place. So that leads me to a good transition to reporting in general. We don't have a lot of robust ways at the moment to be able to generate usage statistics and in a way that you can share out with your your provost or your dean or even a department chair kind of setting where it would be kind of probably nice to be able to generate reports to those types of folks as well. I guess that's a question and a statement. Like Victor and Lauren, do you have to generate any kind of reports for, I can imagine, and I'm talking admin reports, I'm talking about like the actual research analytics, but some sort of reports.
We have currently we have a grant that is supporting the development of this course. And so twice a year, we do a report to the funding agency that, we've put together sort of the general kinds of statistics and graphics and so on, and we just keep updating it. So we have that. As we go into a general deployment phase at the university, and which is going to, of course, take some support of the for staff in the Teaching and Learning Center. I mean, we're supporting it now with grant fund, like Lauren, part of her effort, is that I would imagine that, the provost office, which is what the Teaching and Learning Center is under, would want to see that those kinds of reports. But right now we're providing them to our funding agency. And then, right, as you say, their research is related, but somewhat different focus.
Yeah, so I might want to reach out to you after this and find out, like maybe get an example of one of those reports just to give us a starting place. Because I can imagine the kinds of things you're reporting on would be useful kinds of reports to pull together.
Okay.
Yeah, for others. So for example, we have, OLI course use where we'll have a statistics department somewhere where 4 of the teachers use OLI stats as part of their course. We'd probably want to be able to pull that information together somehow across those different courses to be able to deliver a report to that, like, the chair of that department, to try and get a sense of, how effective OLI courses are in general and be able to compare them to maybe some other types of course materials. I don't know, just as an example.
Yeah, in fact, while I was teaching that 10 or 12 versions of statistical reasoning, I was also trying to get the department to switch over to that course completely and stop having the students buy the then $135 copy of Jacquard's Introduction to Statistics. So I would do a report for the department every year, updating it. So that's another one I could send you. I forgot about that.
Thanks, Victor.
By the way, they didn't do what I said to do.
Well, back, I think more and more that argument is more easily convincing these days, right, than it was in the past.
I had a couple more things, Erin, that were
Please.
peripherally related to what we've been talking about. One of the things that I think you and I had a conversation about was, I think it's really, really useful when you're downloading like big data, like as part, what you have when you download the information, or we make our formal request, is one of the things that we had talked about. If you generate your own report, it's nice if you have a little bit of control over things as easy as column names or like how the data appears. That was one of the things that we had talked about, I think, in a conversation several months ago, having some control over specifically like columns that you're going to be using or looking for. That's a nice feature to have if there's some sort of a dashboard where we're downloading the data ourselves for the big data. Having control over how the report looks, yes, can be nice. So that was one thought for like hopes and dreams for Torus.
Yeah.
Nothing that's required, but something that's a nice benefit.
Right.
And then the other data that we haven't talked about during this conversation is the data report that has to do with student. It's like the CSV file that you download from the students as they're completing the course, which reflects what their scores are actively for each of the quizzes that they're currently doing. So this is just a reminder that we do need to have the ability moving forward in Torus to have that sort of snapshot of completion. Did the students do the quiz or the survey in Module 1A, Module 1B, Module 2A, Module 2B? That's something that we need to retain if we're going to continue to do student completion crediting, which is something that we actively do for the toolbox.
Yeah, and that, thank you, Lauren, for mentioning that, because that opens up a whole other set of requirements around how do we present completion and progress given the kind of activities and things that we provide in the course. So something that gets requested often is being able, for example, to not just see completion, but actually use it as a grading mechanism. And and I'm talking about informatives because it's easy to do. It's already done in summatives where you can actually give students a grade based on either their performance of the summatives or even just that they did it or didn't. But we don't have that mechanism for the formatives. And I really want to explore that a little bit more, because our stance on that is when you start giving grades for formative practice, it actually changes the behavior of the students and their notion of what that practice is for. We want to make sure that they understand that that's a safe space to be able to learn in and not be penalized for, not getting to correctness, for example. So we want to push on that a little bit and figure out a good strategy for how we allow for participation grades and completion grades. And that's not exactly what you were talking about, but it just that's where it took me next, because we do have we could provide a better way of giving completion and being able to see completion in the summatives, but the formatives are another whole can of worms.
One thing that I think could really help boost with that, Erin, especially if you're going to go down the road of completion grading for doing the formatives, is it could be helpful to have basically like a toolbar at the top of the screen for the students that they don't have to go to a separate page to see, did I do this or did I do that? Because that requires an additional step on the part of the students to go to the gradebook. But if you have it as part of the screen that they're seeing as they're progressing through a series of modules, it could then highlight for them if they're missing pieces. So let's say they missed doing 3 formatives. What if that showed up as 3 exclamation marks on the sort of progress bar at the top of the screen? That would be a way for, if you're going to credit for formatives, the real danger there is that students don't do it and they don't realize that they didn't do it. So I think it would help us too, for all of our students to know, okay, I'm progressing through, but I'm progressing through and I'm missing pieces. And they could be different types of colors for the different types of pieces they're missing, whether it be a survey or quiz or one of the learn by doings. But anyway, I would love it if it was part of a progress bar on the screen so that students don't have to click out and go to the grade book, because we find that students don't really do that. at least I find that students don't do that.
Well, and we want to keep them focused on the material and the progress that they're making in that course. We don't want them to have to go out and check something else every so
Yeah.
often and say, did I get all of this? Did I miss anything? I think that's an excellent idea, because you're right. If we're going to start to tie the ability to do participation points and that sort of thing, then your most excellent point is that if we're going to do that, then we need a mechanism for the students as well to make sure they didn't miss anything and they're not going to get graded wrongly just because they couldn't tell what they did or didn't do very easily. So excellent point for sure. And just a good thing to probably do anyway, because I think it would help students with their metacognitive skills to be able to just putting a progress bar across the top keeps them aware that, you know, this is something, you know, it almost makes it, it's a very slight kind of gaming mechanism too, you know, to be able to like see that progress and at a glance and maybe even make it better based on your interaction with the application. So yeah, thank you for that.
The other possibility, if you don't add a progress bar, is if there's like an easy click way at the end of a module to be like, you know, there's an easy click way at the end of this module that you can click on a screen and it'll show you, oh, did I miss anything here? That way it's again, not exiting, not exiting the module, but just kind of cueing them into, I didn't do this or I did do that, because we do occasionally have students that are like, I did the toolbox. And you're like, yes, but you didn't do these aspects of the toolbox. And they're like, what do you mean I didn't do this? So that's, I think completion is always going to be an issue for students.
Okay, that's great to know. And that's another good suggestion, because if we're not going to put it like blatantly as they're going, at least give them a summary page at the end to say, hey, here's how much of this you completed. It's really kind of in a way we want to think more, we definitely want to think more deeply about what does a student dashboard look like, right? We've dabbled in that in the past, and I think we have a student view of data, but I know it's not very, I'll say, robust or well done, or, you know, it's we haven't given it the attention and really like focus group that out with students to say, okay, what kinds of things would you be interested in knowing about your own learning as you're going through a course? And that's probably what you've just mentioned leads me to think about and make sure that we do that kind of user testing and focus grouping and stuff.
Someone asked a good question in the chat. I just put in my 2 cents, but I'm sure that you should chime in on that, Erin.
Okay, so let me see here. Is it adding the progress bar signal to students that these questions are being graded? That's a good point, Tanvi. And I don't know, we want to be careful about how we communicate grading and grading versus, you know, just progress. Then maybe shows just completion based on grade. Yeah, those are good suggestions and ideas. But what Tanvi's question leads me to think about is we want to be, you know, careful about, yeah, what we are signaling to the students, or even be able, another idea that just sparked for me is giving, as part of setting up a course section, maybe giving the instructor a place where they can communicate how they're using the course. So in a way that students can check on or review or look at and say, okay, wait, how am I being graded with this OLI material? There might be kind of like a summary communication mechanism where instructors, when they set up a section, can say, okay, I'm going to, you know, formative participation will be this percentage of your grade, and like somewhere other than just a syllabus, but like right in there to keep it in front of the students, just to help with that misinterpreting what it's being used for. So, and communicate to students. about what is being graded or not. So I took that note. Thanks, Tanvi. So I feel like I've touched on just about every aspect that I wanted to touch on today. So given that I've collected a lot so far, and then I'll be waiting for some examples. Thank you guys so much for coming. I'm just gonna end the meeting a little early. And I'm glad, Victor and Lauren, you were here, because you were able to comment on just about every aspect of these different pieces of analytics and reporting that give me a good sense of, okay, how I want to separate out those topics now and do deep dives and collect examples from you all. So you all do probably, well, I know personally, the kind of analytics analysis that you all do. And it'd be nice to hear to reach out to other researchers to find out more about how they feel about this. But thank you guys for coming and being so great participants and speaking up.
Yeah, and Erin, if you ever want to meet with me and Victor, you're welcome to. Sometimes I think the most fantastic way to think about, how a new platform is being developed and keeping what works in an old platform is to really kind of go through, like, what is the process that happens from like course deployment to like when you're done with the data and all the steps in between. And thinking about it in that respect, I think that's where we can find out, okay, well, where are there things that we're doing as workarounds versus where are things like super easy and, relatively straightforward. At least that's how I think when I think about a process. Otherwise, I miss little things like these. So all of your little queries and your questions are very helpful to me to prompt me to think about, well, this aspect of the process, this is the workaround I'm using that I don't even think is a workaround, but it is. So if you ever want to just kind of go through that sort of deployment process, we're always happy to meet.
Oh, we will. We'll be reaching out. I mean, I've been waiting, we've been developing very actively to get the kind of baseline system in place. And the developers have been doing a great job of keeping their heads down and really getting that baseline system in place. So now this year is really going to be focusing, I think, a lot more outreach, a lot more deep dives with individual users. And so, yeah, I will take you up on that for sure. But you've also given me an idea of maybe for some down the road meetings to focus more on not just individual questions, but a workflow, right? So maybe in another meeting, I can say, okay, here's this workflow, kind of show how usual folks use that workflow or perform tasks through that workflow, and maybe start to elicit different ideas based on that instead of feature requests, more like workflow ideas. So
I love that approach. That's a great approach. That's where I'm gonna, really be able to be like, oh, this is what I need with the workflow.
Well, just you mentioning it, I think that's what I was assuming people were doing as I asked for features, but your comment was really helpful to help me rethink, like, okay, how can I prompt more and elicit more in-depth information about features and functionality? And that's the way to do it. So thank you. Great suggestion. Okay, so with that, happy Friday, everyone, and hope you have a great weekend. And look for the next meeting. That will be February. Let's see, I have it here on a slide. February 4th. It'll be an expansion of this topic, but maybe I'll take for that meeting, I'll prepare and maybe use Lauren's suggestion about workflowing stuff a little bit more. Maybe even have some folks come in and demo. Maybe I might ask you, Lauren, to demo some stuff for us.
I'm always happy to help with that, Erin.
Great. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate you. And we'll see you at other meetings. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Erin.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks.